Welcome to the Montana Department of Labor and Industry Safety and Health Bureau's tutorial on completing OSHA record-keeping forms. This presentation reviews OSHA record-keeping requirements with an emphasis on how to fill out the forms provided in OSHA's record-keeping forms package. It covers what types of operations come under the record-keeping rule and are required to complete the forms, what types of injury and illness incidents must be recorded, and what information is to be included in each of the 3 OSHA forms. It also contains a review of OSHA's record-keeping requirements to complete the forms and evaluate specific exceptions. The 3 forms in OSHA's record-keeping package are the 300 log of work-related injuries and illnesses, the 301 injuries and illnesses incident report, and the 300A summary of work-related injuries and illnesses. You will learn the type of injuries and illnesses that must be recorded and how to record them on the forms. Not all employers must complete the record-keeping forms on an ongoing basis. Employers with 10 or fewer employees throughout the previous calendar year do not need to complete the forms. The employer may come under the requirement only if there were more than 10 employees at any time during that calendar year. When counting employees, you must include full-time, part-time, temporary, and seasonal workers. This exemption is based on the employment of the entire company rather than each individual establishment. For example, if a company has 2 establishments, one with 5 employees and one with 7 employees, the company must fill out the forms for both establishments because the company employment is greater than 10. The OSHA 300 and 301 forms must be maintained on an ongoing basis. Recordable injuries and illnesses must be entered within 7 days of the occurrence on these forms throughout the year. The OSHA Form 300A is completed after the end of the year, summarizing the number of recordable cases that occurred. Employers may use equivalent forms in place of these forms as long as they contain all of the same data elements and are as easy to read as the OSHA forms. Once again, all work-related injuries or illnesses that meet certain severity criteria must be entered on the forms. OSHA defines an injury or illness as an abnormal condition or disorder. Injuries and illnesses include cases such as cuts, fractures, sprains, skin diseases, or respiratory conditions. They can also consist of only subjective symptoms such as aches or pain. Exposures that do not result in any signs or symptoms are not considered injuries or illnesses and should not be documented on the OSHA forms. For example, if an employee is exposed to chlorine and does not exhibit any signs or symptoms due to the exposure, the case would not be recorded on the log, even if it involved preventative medical treatment such as a tetanus shot for a minor cut. It's not an exposure unless it results in signs or symptoms. Cases that are caused, contributed to, or significantly aggravated by events or exposures in the work environment are considered work-related for OSHA record-keeping purposes. Work-relatedness is presumed for injuries and illnesses occurring in the workplace or in locations where the employee is located as a condition of employment. It's important to remember that if work makes any contribution to the injury or illness, it is considered work-related for OSHA record-keeping purposes. There are certain activities that occur in the work environment that OSHA does not consider work-related. For example, injuries resulting directly from eating, drinking, or preparing one's own food at the workplace are not considered work-related. All work-related injuries and illnesses that result in death, loss of consciousness, days away from work, restricted work activity, transfer to another job, or medical treatment beyond first aid must be recorded on the OSHA forms. For cases involving a fatality, enter a checkmark in column G on the OSHA Form 300. Note in column M where the case involved an injury or an illness. Fatalities must be reported to OSHA within 8 hours of the occurrence. The event can be reported by phone to the local OSHA area office or by using OSHA's toll-free number 1-800-321-6742 or by using the reporting application on OSHA's website. For cases that involved 1 or more days away from work, you must place a checkmark in column H on the OSHA Form 300 and enter the number of calendar days the employee was away from work in column K. Then note in column M whether the case involves an injury or an illness. When counting days, be sure to count the days the employee would not have been able to work regardless of whether he or she was scheduled to work. This includes weekends and holidays. Do not count the day of the injury. If the day count reaches 180 calendar days, you may stop counting subsequent days and enter 180 in column K. For cases that involve restricted work activity or job transfer, you must place a check mark in column I on the OSHA Form 300 and enter the number of calendar days the employee was restricted in column L. You count the days in the same manner as counting days away from work. Then note in column M whether the case involves an injury or an illness. An employee is considered restricted if he or she is unable to work a full shift or is unable to perform all of the work activities he or she would be expected to do at least once during a week. If a case involves both days away from work and days of restricted work activity, place a check mark in column H. Leave column I blank and enter the correct day counts in both columns K and L. For example, if an employee had 3 days away from work and 2 of restricted work activity, place a check mark in column H and enter a 3 in column K and a 2 in column L. Again, note in column M whether the case involves an injury or an illness. For cases that involve medical treatment beyond first aid, you must place a check mark on the OSHA Form 300 in column J, which is for other recordable cases. Then note in column M whether the case involves an injury or an illness. For OSHA record-keeping purposes, medical treatment is any treatment for an injury or illness except diagnostic procedures, observation and counseling, and first aid. First aid consists of 14 specific treatments listed in Section 1904.7b5 of the regulatory text. It includes items such as non-prescription medication, wound coverings, and hot and cold treatment. Work-related cases of cancer, chronic irreversible disease, fractured or cracked bones or teeth, or a punctured eardrum must be entered on the OSHA forms. These are considered significant and must be reported to OSHA within 24 hours of learning of the incident. The record-keeping rule also contains special criteria for recording occupational hearing loss, tuberculosis, injuries from needle sticks and sharps potentially contaminated with bloodborne pathogens, and cases involving medical removal required by other OSHA standards. Work-related amputations, inpatient hospitalizations, and the loss of an eye must be reported to OSHA within 24 hours of learning of the incident. These events can be reported by phone to the local OSHA area office or by using OSHA's toll-free number or by using the reporting application on OSHA's public website. For certain privacy concern cases, employers must not enter the employee's name on the 300 form. Instead, they are to enter privacy case. A separate confidential list of the employee's names and case numbers must be kept by the employer and provided to an OSHA inspector upon request. If you have a reasonable basis to believe that information describing the privacy concern case may be personally identifiable, even though the employee's name has been omitted, you may use discretion in describing the injury or illness on both the OSHA 300 and 301 forms. You must enter enough information to identify the cause of the incident and the general severity of the injury or illness, but you do not need to include details of an intimate or private nature. For example, an assault case could be described as an injury from assault. Work-related injuries arising from assault must be entered on the forms. All establishments covered by Part 1904 must complete the summary of work-related injuries and illnesses, even if no injuries or illnesses occurred during the year. Remember to review the log to verify that the entries are complete and accurate before completing this summary. Using the Form 300, count the individual entries you made for each category. Then write the totals on the left side of the Form 300A, making sure you've added the entries from every page of the log. If you had no cases, put a 0. On the right side of the Form 300A, fill in the establishment information. Also in this section of the form, a company official must certify that the entries on the summary are true, accurate, and complete. The certifying official must be the owner of the company, an officer of the corporation, the highest-ranking company official at the establishment, or that person's supervisor. You must post a copy of the annual summary in each establishment in a visible place or places where notices to employees are customarily posted. You must post it no later than February 1st of the year following the year covered by the records and keep the posting in place for 3 months until April 30th. You must keep these forms on file for 5 years following the year to which they pertain. You must also update the Form 300 with any changes that may occur to the recorded cases during that period. Do not send completed copies of the forms to OSHA unless asked to do so. You must make the forms available to employees, former employees, their representatives, and to OSHA officials upon request. Both the Log 300 and Form 301 incident reports will include information relating to employee health and thus can only be used in a manner that protects confidentiality to the extent possible while promoting occupational safety and health. The record-keeping page, however, includes links to reference documents that address the specific requirements of the record-keeping rule and answer many recurring questions, as well as a link to the record-keeping forms package itself. To learn the details of what you need to do to be in compliance with the record-keeping rule, you may want to take some time to familiarize yourself with the regulatory text and FAQs posted here. The letters of interpretation and the record-keeping handbook are also useful reference documents linked from the record-keeping page. If you have specific questions that you cannot find direct guidance for in these documents, you may want to try the record-keeping Q&A search application. You can also contact Montana's OSHA office at 406-247-7494.